Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausam Pereira. Strengthening of ties in key areas of defence, trade and infrastructure will top the agenda when Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets his Japanese counterpart Shinzo Abe in Japan next week, the country's envoy Kenji Hiramatsu said on Monday. At an interaction at the Brookings India think tank, Kenji said that talks are on between the two sides on strengthening maritime cooperation, including the signing of the Mutual Logistical Support Agreement. Prime Minister Modi will be in Japan on October 28th and 29th for the annual summit between the Prime Ministers of the two countries. It will be the fifth annual summit between Modi and Abe and their 12th meeting overall since 2014. India and Japan are collaborating on various fronts, including high-speed railway, which has been planned between Mumbai and Ahemdabad. The project has been facing resistance over acquisition of land. Japan is also funding the project, and the envoy said that the first tranche of loan has been transferred. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take stock of Prime Minister Modi's upcoming visit to Japan. Joining me on the program today are Pravit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Editor, Hindustan Times, Ashok Sajanhar, former diplomat, and Professor Swaran Singh, School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Pravit, let me begin the program with you. What can we expect when Prime Minister Modi visits Japan on the 28th and 29th of October?
There'll be two broad areas where we'll see, I think, a lot of forward progress. The first one is on the defense side. While India and Japan have rhetorically spoken about their close strategic ties, there actually hasn't been that much happening on the defense side other than a few exercises, naval exercises. But the Indians have been very eager to access Japanese defense technology. Japan is one of the world's most advanced defense industrial complexes, especially in maritime, anti-submarine warfare, and so on. They are arguably second only to the United States. But we've struggled with that. Mr. Abe is very interested in the idea, but his bureaucracy has put up stiff resistance to this concept because of their pacifist constitution. So we're going to see some actual concrete movement on that ground from what I've heard. You've mentioned that they will sign the Maritime Domain Awareness Agreement and they will begin the process of a logistics agreement. But I think there'll be other areas in terms of anti-submarine warfare technology and so on. We should see some progress. The second issue, which has been a long-term project, which is the connectivity game, that both countries are interested in developing alternatives to the Chinese Belt Road Initiative and helping India build a broader strategic connectivity zone in the South Asia region. So they're already sponsoring, and I will continue to add more projects in the Northeast to help us connect to Bangladesh, Myanmar, Bhutan. We have heard that they will be announcing one large major project, infrastructure project in the region. We're not certain what it is, but probably a port of some variety. But this will be a joint one. It'll be India and Japan together producing a port maybe in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or something like that. We don't know. That will be the big announcement when they go. Those will be the two broad areas we'll see the most degree of action.
What do you believe is going to top the agenda, Ambassador?
I think both in terms of what the two countries can do together, whether it is defense, whether it is connectivity, and in addition to the connectivity projects that have been mentioned, there have been within the country and outside there are other connectivity issues also. Like both India and Japan had agreed to work on the AAGC, the Asia Africa Growth Corridor. That is, in terms of the Belt Road Initiative and the manner in which it has been going to other countries. How is it that other countries, India, Japan, United States, some of the Australia, some of the others can provide some alternative forms of financing? So that, and even in the case of Chabahar, there have been discussions. Of course, when we come within India, there have been a large number of projects. You mentioned about the bullet train Shinkansen. So that, what are the problems? I think that is definitely going to. And then there is the dedicated freight corridor. There is also the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor with 12 townships coming on the side. Then there is also the Bengaluru-Chennai corridor, industrial corridor. So I'm sure all these will come. But I think in addition to all this, what the two countries are going to do together, what is going to be extremely significant and relevant is also the situation. We said that there is going to be an agreement on the maritime domain awareness that is going to be signed. So what is happening as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, and how is it that both the countries can work together? Now we are aware that last year in November, when around the sidelines of the East Asia Summit, we had the first meeting of the Quad countries, and we also see that the second meeting of the Quad countries has taken place again in June this year. But then that has been at official level, junior official level. There has been some interest amongst the other countries to raise this, to hire this thing.
Sorry to interrupt, Ambassador, but why do you think that there hasn't been really traction at the highest level as far as Quad is concerned? You know, you've seen meetings taking place at the junior level, but not at the highest level.
Yeah, I was just coming to that. And that is because I think all the countries concerned, and particularly India and Australia, we have good relations with China. We don't want to do anything to provoke China in that sense. While we want to sort of develop a sort of a coalition of countries to be able to balance the aggressiveness of China and the assertiveness of China that we have seen in that area. And now it is coming into the Indian Ocean. So I think it's in the interest of all of those. But they also don't want to do anything that would provoke China in any way. And while China might have said, that whatever this Quad is, it's like a froth, it's like a bubble, there is no substance to it. But I know, meaning talking to some of the Chinese experts on all these issues, they are considerably worried. They are very anxious as to what it could ultimately lead to. So far, there has been nothing that has happened, of significance, except 2 or 3 issues.
But it doesn't mean that nothing can happen.
The potential is great.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. The potential is great. So far, they have said that let there be free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific. Let there be freedom of navigation, let there be freedom of overflights, etc. And that, whatever disputes are there, they should be resolved by dialogue and through respect for international law. That is particularly the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas 1982, which has been rejected by China when it decided upon its 9-dash line.
Absolutely.
And in the 2016 judgment of the Permanent Court of Arbitration had also rejected China's claims. So they have, I think, in terms of principles, they have come out with some ideas. But how to take it forward, that has been lacking. And I think that is going to be a very significant area of deliberations between the two leaders when they meet.
All right. Professor Swaran Singh, talking about working together, India and Japan working together, if you look at India's track record as far as implementation is concerned, it's been very poor. We have tremendous goodwill from all our neighbors and all the countries that we have formal diplomatic ties with. So going forward, do you believe that, Japan and India going together as far as some of these projects in other friendly neighboring countries or other countries of the world are concerned is going to help us both?
I think India sometimes looks moving slow, partly because of, at subconscious level comparisons are drawn with Chinese, of course, who have a sort of early harvest focus on mega projects. But India hasn't changed. I mean, our project speed was, I think, same earlier also. But maybe now comparisons make it look like India is moving rather slow. To some extent, maybe lately Japanese economy, society also has seen a certain sort of slowdown overall. So it could appear that maybe these two countries have not moved forward at the speed expected of them. But as Ambassador just mentioned, China is very sensitive and conscious of these two countries coming together. So also these two countries are extremely conscious of China. So, as we speak, Shinzo Abe is in Beijing and he's going to meet Indian Prime Minister, who also had an informal summit with Xi Jinping in April. So I think leaders at personal level are building enormous amount of mutual confidence and bonhomie, first of all. And then I think to some extent, each one is driving and pushing each other's policies and perceptions. So for example, we have heard this for a long time that India has not moved really, not much traction, as you said, in defense cooperation, for example, whether it is U-2 amphibious the planes or it is the Soryu class attack submarine. Negotiations are moving very slow. But right now we are hearing that in December, for example, the Air Force exercise which India has had with the United States is going to add on Japan into it, to begin with as observers. But next month again, we will have army exercises between the two sides. So other than the maritime domain awareness agreement, there are a lot of other possibilities of agreements in mutual joint research and development projects, in artificial intelligence, in robotics, in lot other frontier areas of technology, where, as Pramit just said, Japan is, second to only United States. So India would like to benefit not only in defense technology, which is desirable, but also other frontier areas of technology in that sense. So I think there are some forward movement, and I think some traction could be seen. But yes, there is certain amount of slowdown in negotiations, slowdown in our mutual economic engagement. Trade has seen slowdown over last 4 years, coming down from about 16 billion to about 13 billion. Even within that, the trade deficit has gone up, enormously, because Indian exports have come down virtually by half. And when you compare India-Japan economic relationship with that of Japan's relationship with China, $300 billion of trade compared to $13 billion of India. So there is enormous space to expand between second and third largest economy. So I think there is a possibility of expanding, but we all agree at top level there are sort of symbolisms are very strong, but at the level of managing those goodwill in terms of achieving results and outcomes, maybe we need to really move it faster.
Okay. Potential is large, though, is what the professor is suggesting. Talking about projects, Pramit, over the last 4 years, several projects have been, announced, several pacts have been signed, both by India and Japan. What is the status of these projects really? Have they been moving in the way we would like them to move forward?
Well, the biggest one is, and the first one really was the Delhi Metro, which has been an amazing success. It's now largely Indian financed and run, and is working, is their biggest problem now is they're running out of colors for the different lines they have. So the Delhi Metro is working brilliantly, and that was really the first mega project that Japan did here. The Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, the land is now largely purchased and the construction has actually begun. And the electronic tagging structure for the containers that will go through has already been set up. So when I've talked to the Japanese, they said it's behind schedule, but by only about 2 years. And so they fully expect that by 2020, a large portion of the corridor, it doesn't have to all be simultaneously come up, but the bit from Maharashtra, Gujarat upwards will be functional. The Western Dedicated Freight Corridor is moving slowly, but that is largely World Bank financed now. It's no longer a Japanese project. They've only done the planning for that. That's tied up because there are 2,500 lawsuits against it, largely by farmers who want more compensation. But it's also moving forward. It actually is not behind schedule by more than 2 years as well. The Bangalore-Chennai one has just begun, so that's just a process that's in the making. The high-speed bullet train is, of course, the bullet train is the newest project, and as has been mentioned, you mentioned that the first 5,000 crores has been sanctioned by the Japanese, but they only sanction when they're fairly clear that you've actually accomplished something. And there'll be land acquisition issues, that's almost a standard thing. The point is the farmers are not saying we don't want to give the land, we just want more money. And that's a standard sort of struggle that happens with almost any large project in India, whether it's Japanese or Indian. So I will see, but I think the bullet train, so far, nobody is particularly alarmed either on the Indian or Japanese side as to what is going on. The overseas, the Northeast Road projects have actually been doing quite well. We've got a large number of the connectivity projects that the Japanese have funded, have been coming up one by one. A lot of them are just expanding existing roads. The overseas projects are much more difficult because it require a third-party involvement. The Africa corridor, for example, what the heart of this, when I was in last time in Tokyo, the Japanese said the issue is to make sure that we do not mimic the debt structure that the Chinese have imposed on the African countries. It's not that the corridor will be very difficult to build, it's that the financing must be clearly defined as an alternative to the African countries. And that is the heart of what we're doing. But the two areas, Mombasa and Kenya, Nacala and Mozambique, have been identified. The land has already been purchased. The SEZ is now on its way. So we're starting to see the beginnings of that project come through.
So everything is almost on track and moving forward in the right direction is what you're suggesting. All right, Ambassador, yes, ties between the two countries are robust. Where do you see the ties heading, and what are the possible new areas of cooperation between India and Japan?
First of all, I think what we need to do is that whatever is on the plate, to get it completed quickly. And I think I would have a slight bit of a difference in this to say that we are still continuing to move at the same pace as far as project delivery is concerned as we were doing earlier. I think there has been a much greater focus because this comparison has become very stark. People and countries seem to comment that when a project is given to China, it gets delivered, it gets completed quickly and on time, while as far as India is concerned, it is been quicker to make promises, but then getting results on the ground has not been that effective. But I think of late, if you see over the last few years, and I could give you examples, let us say whether it is even the Chabahar project, it had been going on since 2003. And we saw that when in 2016 a decision was taken, trilateral agreement between presidents of Iran, Afghanistan and Prime Minister of India was signed. Then within a year and a half, India was able to do that, to expand and upgrade it from 2.5 million tons to 8.5 million tons. Similarly, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, the Salma Dam, what is known as Afghanistan-India Friendship Dam, there also it has been going on for the last 15 years, but we were able to get it off the ground, completed, handed, delivered. Also in Afghanistan, the parliament building, again it had been going on since last 15 years, and that also. So the point I'm making is that projects have started moving much quicker, maybe because of our particular issues, problems. They are still lagging a little behind what it was earlier intended to be, but still they are making good, decent progress, and I think it needs to be pushed through.
Absolutely.
Secondly, I think in terms of whatever are the commitments that have been made. For instance, when the Prime Minister visited Japan the first time, that is in 2014, that was his first overseas visit after visiting Bhutan, so to say. So first external visit was to Japan, and there was a commitment to $35 billion coming in over the next 5 years. Now, I understand that it has been coming in over the last, the first 3 years, it was to the tune of about $13 billion that had come. But how, that investment can come in, and I think it's going to be a win-win situation for both India and Japan, because India at the moment is looking for investment. There is, whether it is in area of greater production, greater productivity, job, employment, skill development. So that investment coming in, the commitments that have been made, how can they be made on whatever is on paper, how it can be implemented on the ground. Then there are, the cutting edge of technology, those areas, whether it is robotics, whether it is artificial intelligence, and I think there is lot of possibility. We've been talking about it, that Japan has great possibilities in this regard, not only in the area of defense, but also in the area of manufacturing. We have signed this agreement on Make in India, support from them to Make in India. As far as our smart cities projects are concerned, between Varanasi and Kyoto, there has been a sister city agreement. There have been other cities in the country. So how is it that the earlier commitments, I think that they can be implemented on time, that will give great confidence to both sides to engage themselves with the renewed energy and enthusiasm in taking the relationship forward.
Right. Professor, what areas of the ties, if any at all, need attention, do you think?
I think there is enormous potential which can be reaped much easily in expanding economic relationship. Trade to begin with, I mean, it's really been going down instead of going up. And there are the issues that are sort of brass tack issues that can be addressed. For example, there is repeated complaints from Indian business companies that they have some kind of market access constraints from the Japanese, and those are issues that can be addressed at the level of either experts or officials or at the highest level. Or issues, for example, of repeatedly Indian businessmen feeling that Japanese have unusually high standards of regulation and standards of both services and commodities in terms of so Indian goods don't really appear that competitive. Or simple things like language limitations, that people in negotiating business or cutting deals, the language issue can also be addressed. So many things. For example, in 2011, they had signed something called the Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which was supposed to facilitate several of these brass tacks issues. For example, facilitating visas for the services sector, especially for IT sector. So some of these issues are at the levels of really day-to-day level irritations, and I think they can be really resolved much easily, so that the economic relationship and the trade can literally start picking up and then go ahead and sort of become a kind of a major pillar of the mutual relationship, because both are large economies in Asia, and I think that is only expected of them. And then of course beyond that, we think we should have also some forward movement in this summit, and from there in technology transfers, which have been a main I think a kind of a problem area in transferring major technologies, like either it is U-2 amphibious planes or it is Soryu class attack submarines. India insists now increasingly that it should not be just gadget transfers and license production of assembly here. It should be in terms of technology transfer from blueprints. So I think those are issues that can be also addressed. These two countries have enormous responsibility, not just potential, in terms of coordinating their understanding of how to manage this free and open Asia Pacific. And Chinese become so sensitive because this automatically means freedom of navigation and aviation in South China Sea, which is seen as hub of Indo-Pacific. And I think in that sense also coordinating their policies and perceptions in terms of how they articulate these ideas of what they mean by inclusive, free and open Indo-Pacific, and take those, I think, the parlays at a higher level among foreign ministers, if not beyond that. So in that sense, I think showcasing that they have a specific understanding and shared strategy, not just sentimental goodwill,
right,
and also solving some of these irritations at the level of brass tacks, and then can facilitate movement forward on whether it is technology transfer issues or it is trade issue or investment issues, which are really kind of slagging for some years, I think now, and that really is becoming much more apparent.
All right, talking about China, in the recent past, after the trade war between China and the United States, China has become or tried to mend its ways and tried to build bridges between India and Japan as well. So that having been said, Ambassador, do you believe that China is going to be the elephant in the room when the two prime ministers meet?
Absolutely. This is what I mentioned also right at the beginning, because bilateral issues are, they will talk about it. Their officials, ministers would have already done the homework and how to take things forward, what are the areas, new areas where we can work together. But as you said, I think the strategic discussions on how to deal with China, how to handle China, I think that is going to be the most important subject in terms of conversation at that level, at the top level. And as has been mentioned, Shinzo Abe is in Beijing today, and tomorrow he'll be there. So I think this is very good that he would have visited Beijing. He would have got a feel, meaning it's a rare summit meeting that he is having with Xi Jinping. So he would be able to get a feel from there and share that his assessment with Prime Minister Modi. And let us also face it that China is softening towards Japan as also India. We saw that in the Wuhan summit, the so-called Wuhan spirit, the so-called reset of ties. In my view, it's all a tactical sort of adjustment that is being made by China. So, and as far as India and Japan are concerned, they share so much in common with each other ideologically in terms of principles. Both are democracies, rule of law, pluralism, tolerance, etc. So many values that bind them together. So this will be a huge issue of discussion between the two of them, because I think what China is also trying to do is to co-opt as many countries as possible on its side, that it stands for international law, for the principles of the World Trade Organization, against which Mr. Trump has acted against it by imposing tariffs on first 34 billion, then 16 billion, then $200 billion, so $250 billion in all. that it is Mr. Trump, it is the United States which is violative of international law. It is acting against multilateralism. It is being very protectionist, and it is acting to stall, if not completely derail, the growth of China. So it will try to co-opt these countries.
Right.
But I think it is up to us to sort of see where our interests lie and how to have working relations and how to promote these relations with China. But of course, see that its assertiveness on the maritime issues is also effectively responded to. We have a game plan, we have a policy to respond to what China is doing.
Absolutely. You know, Professor, talking about China and staying on with China, now, you know, as the ambassador rightly pointed out, that China has made adjustments in the recent past. But that having been said, do India and Japan still need to be wary?
I think we have to be really wary, because as Ambassador Sajjan Har just said, it looks like it's a tactical move from Chinese side. Given the fact that they are having kind of a trade war with United States, it suits them to soften on Japan and India and kind of look at them as alternative for economic engagement and exports, because China is export-driven development model in this sense. So China would be definitely on their consciousness as they meet. But I think on the Japanese side, they would also perhaps will be extremely curious to see from Shangri-La dialogue onwards. Indian Prime Minister and Foreign Office has been underlining that it's not going to be exclusive Indo-Pacific for India. We want to engage both Russia and China into Indo-Pacific. So obviously Japanese side would be curious as to what is the thinking behind, what is the motivation behind such a proposition that India is making. If our assessment is that the minor shift in Wuhan was basically tactical, then is that also tactical from Indian side, or is it in terms of serious strategic move that India is trying to make?
Right.
But I think important to underline here that India has successfully institutionalized only 2 summit meetings. One is with Russia and other is with Japan. So in that sense, even if you look at the personal bonhomie is important, of course, but even at institutional level, I think this summit meeting is important. These 2 states are engaging each other far more seriously, and therefore partly driven by Chinese consciousness, but I think they have a lot more of on their own to move forward and take responsibilities both at regional and global level.
Very quickly, closing comment from you, Ambassador, on what would India like to walk away with from the annual summit?
I think a reiteration, a strong reiteration of the continuing commitment of both sides. After all, there's the 5th meeting between the 2 leaders, and both of them have indicated that relationship between India and Japan is very important. Mr. Modi has said very categorically that Japan is the linchpin of India's Indo-Pacific policy. So in that sense, whatever has been on the ground, whatever is being discussed, to give it a very robust push forward.
All right. Professor, very quickly in 15 seconds. So what would Japan be expecting really?
I think Japan is already having a leader who's supposed to stay on at least for next 3 years. India is moving into election year soon. So I think they will be looking at assessment of what could happen in coming general elections, whether the Prime Minister will continue to lead India, and I think that kind of assessment is important for Japan. Otherwise, to engage other leaders in case there is any possibility of alternative emerging. So they would be looking at whether this personal relationship would be moving forward in long run, and if it is moving, then I think the tenor and tone of relationship and initiatives would be affected accordingly.
All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.